Hello, today we will be discussing IFS therapy for addictions by Sykes, and we'll be discussing the section 4, treatment, from page 74 till page 96, from getting to know firefighters till the section when firefighters run the system. So feel free to raise your hand and start the discussion. Let's take a moment to review the reading material. And you're invited to raise your hand. I actually have something from this section. And Sykes here recommends reviewing with the client whatever strategies they tried to use to control their drinking, eating, sexual obsessions, online gambling, etc. So she is recommending to go through that. And also, she talks about appreciation, appreciating the addictive protectors. And here is a section I will read. Our first priority is not controlling compulsivity, but getting in relationship and building healthy inner connections between firefighter parts and the client's self. Additionally, we invite the client to identify how their addictive parts are serving them at this time. And we solicit information about other firefighter activities that feel beneficial, like hanging out with friends, walking the dog, playing an instrument for fun, racing motorcycles, submerging into a novel, binging on a TV series, and playing video games or going to a movie. I found that quite fascinating, that she recommends also exploring other beneficial activities, other firefighters, the healthy firefighters, well, or the socially acceptable firefighters. I wonder, I mean, I've not heard this before, so yeah, reviewing she's recommending that you review what all the strategies somebody has tried, shows the therapists creates an environment of appreciation, and also identifying other healthy firefighter activities. Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I would tend to call these activities here soothing, self-soothing activities rather than addiction. In my understanding, because addiction by definition is something which you are addicted. You cannot stop. You are addicted. It's not a choice. Well, there's a point at which it can be a choice, but then it becomes an internal mechanism. You know, throughout this now, I'm questioning because yeah, this is how I read this. I read all the stuff yesterday and today, and it's taken me some time because it's quite. I've never really come at it before, of being so welcoming to firefighters in terms of addiction. So, you know, I mean, I work with people who've been in addiction for 10 years of behaviors which are damaging them and lead to really serious issues in their life. So, you know, I do make a distinction between these activities here which I would call self-soothing, and addiction. But in reading this section, the idea of firefighters being available and listening, and this self-listening to the firefighter, must say, is a new approach for me, and it's really good, because it does bring out a lot of the underlying what's going on, and that dialogue between. I mean, I did the course with Cece Sykes last year, so I did a 2-day course with her. So I've gotten this before, but reading it this time, this has struck. So I've heard this before, but reading this time, for some reason, it really hit me. That's, listening to the fight. I'm talking about not these things here, but the addiction, the actual addictive personality, and it's very interesting, and it's helping me to think through work I do with some of the people I work with. How will I approach? I think I might approach them differently, because I tend to work a lot with their managers. The idea of listening and the self being available to their firefighters is, other addiction is interesting, especially, and I've got a question there I can't put a page number on this because it's just my thoughts around the whole thing. But, it's not always easy, as it seems to be in here, as I see it anyway, for a person to access self when you're in this dynamic between manager, firefighter, and manager, so blended, there is no self. Often it's so difficult to get to the self. This makes it sound straightforward. It doesn't appear to be so straightforward when people are so ingrained in their managers and firefighters, that backwards and forwards. They're just some thoughts. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Are you complete, Paul? Yeah.
Yeah, finished.
Anne?
Thanks, Paul, for that. I think so I don't think she's calling the soothing parts addictive parts. She's calling the soothing parts other firefighters, which again was new for reading this book, I think, right? Because there's the idea of healthy firefighters that was introduced, and how in the first chapter she talks about like the importance of healthy firefighters, which was very new for me, and how important they are for offering release and taking the break, and that's actually as important as having well-functioning managers. And so that part was very new, this whole discussion of having healthy firefighters, recognizing them, even cultivating new ones if they potentially don't exist. Yeah, so I think it's not that she's calling the soothing parts addictive parts per se, but it is new and different to be really seeing that these healthy, quote, activities, both, I guess, healthy and socially acceptable are separate, right? You can have healthy and not socially acceptable, or you could have not healthy and socially acceptable. So, whichever, but something basically that the client is comfortable with is what she's saying, right? Something that the client does have a good relationship with, and then using recognition of that with the relationship toward the social parts or soothing parts, or watching TV parts, and saying, well, then the firefighter parts that the client is having a negative or difficult relationship with, the addictive firefighter, which is different from the soothing firefighters, or the healthy distraction, or at least the socially acceptable distracting firefighters, to just help the client see, well, they are all firefighters. There is some relationship between the function they serve of allowing ourselves to be in the moment, to take the break, to have the release. And so I think it's really interesting that she's making that link to say, okay, well, it's almost like there are parts of yourself that you have, that you can have an okay relationship towards, and they are not so different from this problematic addictive part in certain ways. And that's really interesting. And the other point you made, Paul, which I thought was really good and interesting, is that we talk a lot about how the inner child is the pain of the inner child can be, very scary and activating. And, we don't want to have, it's hard to have self-energy because we're afraid the exile will overwhelm the system. And absolutely, I can see the same fear for firefighters, right? That's why it's also harder in a sense than for the managers, because a firefighter could overwhelm the system very much too, and that has the same like overwhelm problem as a exile overwhelming, perhaps, in being more reactive. So that's all. I'm complete.
Great, thank you. Mark?
Oh, I was just I guess Anne really hit what I was going to say too, is if you read it carefully there, it talks about the addictive parts that are serving them at this time, but also soliciting information about other firefighter activities that feel beneficial. And then the whole, what you're showing there on the screen too makes the point that as with harm reduction approaches, we subscribe to the idea that recovery is any positive change a client makes. So this is reducing harm. Addictive parts, when we're blended with our addictive parts, we're doing the drugs, we're doing the alcohol, it's dominating, it's harming our life, and so on. Whereas the learning to do beneficial things and realize that there's firefighters that say, hey, go take a walk in nature, go play guitar or piano or something, go walk your dog and stuff, instead of taking the next drink or going out and getting drunk or whatever it is.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
Yes. Wow. Yes. Thank you. Wow, that's brilliant. Yeah. You're complete, Mark?
Yeah.
Marlene?
Hi. It seems to me that the more the manager is harsh and critical about the compulsive behavior of addiction, that the more the firefighter is entrenched in repeating the behavior to ward off this criticism and this harshness. And it seems also that this polarity, the separation with the manager so the firefighter can be seen without that clouded harshness, it seems that we have to go back to our earliest, or the client's earliest experiences and experiments with fighter behaviors. And it says it on page 129, but it's our first page, I think. And, when I go back and look at when those compulsive behaviors or acting out started, and that soothing was necessary, it was a very young child and then a young teenager. And so the empathy comes in. It seems like there's a natural separation or unblending from the critical manager, because the young part is a child, and children are vulnerable and they're lovable. It's very hard to be critical of a child. When I have a visual of, here's this child who's raging and wants to eat all the chocolate, it's like I can only have empathy. I can't be critical. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm out. Thank you.
Okay. I really got from this that I really like that we have a lot of firefighters, and we don't have just the addictive firefighters. There are other firefighters that try to soothe the system, but they feel beneficial. So maybe there is a kind of choice, helping the client to notice that they might have a choice. And also, by going back and reviewing all the strategies to help, so there is some kind of, and how the firefighter is really committed to giving you that relief. So, I don't know. Anne?
Yeah, I think just like you were saying that there are other parts committed to helping in the firefighter way, it's very interesting. It's like you have other help too, not just self-help, but
Yeah.
help from these other parts that serve similar functions to this addictive firefighter and are looking out for the release and relief part of you and the soothing part of you that this addictive firefighter wants, and you have lots of support for those needs and
Yes.
help them even strengthen their relationship to these other firefighters and maybe in a way be able to enrich those other ways of resourcing and getting those needs met.
Wow. Yes. 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 Before I started doing IFS therapy, that's what I was doing with parts therapy using hypnotherapy. I would enlist other firefighters, that's in like in IFS language, to replace the addictive behavior, to strengthen the healthy firefighters, and I would ask the smoking part or the gambling part if it's willing to stand down because of the damage. So yeah, and I'm complete on that. So I will move forward to the book. And feel free to let me know if you already want to share something. I will mention one more little thing here. You know, about, I'm interested in the why going to the past. And I quite like this part here. She says, for example, if a client smoked a cigarette, shoplifted a sandwich, lied to get out of trouble, played cards for money, etc. What was going on in their life? How old were they? Depending on a client's environment and history, this rebellion could have happened when they were a teenager or even in grade school. As they revisit the past, help them connect with their young protectors and listen to their intentions. And why I like this? I like this because our protectors, in most cases, are young. They are teenagers or young, or, grade school kids. And they've learned to protect us in this way, and we still have them with us. They're not our adult self. They typically are, they are like the young teenager or young kid. So it gives a better understanding of our system by revisiting the past. So yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, what this brought up for me was because I mean, my addictive behaviors began when I was I don't know, 17, 18, 19, the strong ones. Although I was already smoking by then. I was smoking at a very young age, which was about, that's what everybody else did, and you join in, and then it becomes something you can't stop. But I've stopped 15 years now, thank goodness, 10, 15 years. But for me as well, what came up for me here as well was the relationship for me with dissociation, because of my history of trauma, and which goes back to the early years. I think when I started using drugs, which I did from the ages of 16, 17, 17, 18, 19, everybody else did, and I was drinking as well. But yeah, it's interesting because it does bring up all the stuff, and that's what I liked about this, was befriending and listening to the firefighter parts of me brought up the background of all that, which was, my mother's mental illness, my mother's depression, being suicidal, my father's drinking, coping with that, my own issues around abuse and such like. I was coping with so many things. Part of me was dissociating. I have a history of dissociation, back to Joanna Tomley. But part of me was addictive as well to manage my life at that time. And it makes complete sense. You know, as a child, I couldn't cope with all that. As a teenager, rather, I couldn't cope with all that. So there was a way of escaping it all, either by dissociation or by addiction. So yeah, so this is very interesting. The talking about the firefight, when did the behavior begin? When I trace that back, it then brings up all the background, which that's still something I'm working on in therapy for myself. But other people I work with, I'm going to be, perhaps this is getting me to think about ways of working with some of the people I work with who are still entrenched in addiction, maybe be more for helping, either for me to be the self for them. I mean, that's one way, is because some of the people I work with don't access self easily, but I can be self. I can be myself, and I can be self for them to explore their firefighters, addictive firefighters. So yeah, I'm finished. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Anne?
It makes me think of how much similarity there is between exiles and firefighters in a way. Like like exiles, these young firefighters are very much not seen, because even though they're present, as in their behaviors are so loud, they're not really ever given the time to, the way exiles were not given the time that they needed, and they're so young, and they're actually reacting so rawly from a directly vulnerable place, not like a more socialized manager who maybe is a bit more, kind of acts, quote, more adult in that way.
Yes, wow, yes. I think we will see it further on, how many, other people attack the firefighters, and also your own system, the managers, the critics, they're so harsh towards the firefighter.
Yeah.
And no one sees, wow, so the firefighter sees you as someone who's drowning, and they try to keep you afloat, and no one appreciates them. And only like through IFS, you can really embrace and appreciate and connect with a deeper purpose.
Yeah, they're so unseen. Exactly. It's
Unseen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do have a question around this, but I'll ask now, and I think we'll find it later on. Sykes talks a lot about positive intention. Find the positive intention. Find the positive intention of the firefighter. And I am thinking that, the 6 F's, guys: find, focus, flesh out, befriend. And I'm wondering, I think in some cases, it might be more helpful to find the positive intention early on in the session. Because some of those parts, even a critic, when you try to create a self to part relationship, this critic is so ruthless. Parts really, other parts are angry at it. There's a lot of parts around, say, the critic or an addictive or risk-taking firefighter. But when you see the positive intention, I think just this helps the system to calm down a bit, to soften a bit. I think there's a little bit more space when you notice that there's something positive that this part of you is trying to do. And I am wondering if, I do have a part that wants to speed up the healing. I am wondering if, finding the positive intention, if that, for some people, it might be more helpful to find that early on if we can. Does that make sense a little bit? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Han?
Oh yeah, I think that makes complete sense. And I think, I mean, in a way, that's the essence of IFS, right? Really recognizing that they're coming from that beautiful place and that they're really all trying to protect us. I wonder if it's not coming earlier in the typical recommendations because it's quite hard to do. Because I feel like typically I think there's a lot of resistance to seeing the positive intentions of the firefighters.
Yeah.
Will automatically, the critic will be so loud and I think it was said earlier in the previous page that people mistake or interpret listening to the firefighter as condoning their behaviors. And there's very much those.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So there is a word going near the firefighters, like, why would you, your system will say, why do you want to go near the firefighter? Is it because you're condoning this kind of behavior? This kind of behavior? You
You
give me.
want to be that person? Are you going to like let yourself fall and collapse into being that person that we're so worried about being or being consumed by?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Here we'll read another little part. So it says here, people don't easily associate early deprivation and wounding with their addictive process. Rather, they are most likely to say they had a rotten week and simply felt like giving in to the urge. That is, wow, what an insight. That's exactly how it is, pretty much for everyone. No one thinks, oh, I'm an alcoholic, or I've got this kind of addiction, or whatever that is, and I am gambling because of my early childhood, or maybe my teenage years, or maybe in my 20s, I went through some kind of trauma. Because most of the trauma happens in the early years. Of course, we have trauma in the later years, a lot of trauma in the early years, like abandonment issues, feeling unloved, lonely. And no one, I don't know, unless you do your inner work, you will not, people will think it's like, no, I've had a bad day now. Yes. I've got two hands up, so I'm not, is it Paul? Next, I don't know. Anne, is it? Yeah. You go for Paul, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is an area that I do in terms of work that I do with people with 12-step, because the approach is to, first of all, examine your family history and where you are in that. And, when I work with people, it's often because, and I was looking if there is a book, and if everybody knows of it, on 12-step and IFS, if anybody's written that book yet, because I was looking on during the week and I couldn't find anything. 12-step work with an IFS and approach to IFS. But anyway, I do tend to ask people. I was working with somebody this week, and I was saying, I always ask the question, what's going on? That's the question I ask. So they may be in their addiction of whatever it is, but I'll say, well, what's going on in your life at the moment? What's concerns? What's the week been like? Blah 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 blah. And so, for example, this person who has a history of extreme chronic OCD is dealing with his OCD, but he takes it for granted. He's not talking about it. He's just used to dealing with it. He fears finding hypodermic needles on the street. He fears asbestos. He has this thing about, if I don't speak something, do this thing, then somebody's going to die. And he takes all this for granted. And I said, well, that is an extreme level of anxiety that you're dealing with. Surprise, surprise, your addiction's coming in to medicate. So that's just one example. And other people have. So I do ask that question, what's going on? And I'll get a picture of their life, and then we'll look at, well, these are Bill W., the founder of 12-step process, said, sobriety with alcohol begins. You begin by stopping, but then you need to get to the sources. So he was saying the same thing, but not in parts language, obviously, but get to the source of what is being medicated. So yeah,
Yes, yes.
I finished. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. That's brilliant. Yes. And here there's a question, and this interesting question. So how can a therapist intervene effectively when a client has so little self-awareness and sense of self-agency? And there's an answer here. We start by asking questions that invite clients to notice their patterns and protector polarities. We continue by painting the big picture, pointing out that their protective parts are divided into two opposing teams, and helping them notice how vulnerable they were when they turned to distracting and self-medicating. It's about, noticing your system and creating that inner relationship, noticing the big picture and the patterns. So yeah. And I'm complete. And I'll move forward through the book. I like this kind of hopeful message here. Sykes says, in IFS, we assert that it's never too late to heal attachment wounds and bring exiles to a safer place. I like this hope in this message. We've talked about understanding the client and reviewing their history. Here's something else we need to review. Okay, understanding the client and their history and whatever they tried and how hard their firefighters, addictive and high risk firefighters, are trying to offer relief. And what other healthy activities, healthy firefighters exist in the system. But also the therapist has another job here. And I really like that Sykes spells it out. She says, like, our job as a therapist, is to help clients explore their relational network, including outside pressures and obligations, so we can clarify external polarities that activate and impact their compulsive behaviors. How does the client spend their day? Whom do they see? What are those relationships like? And that is so important to understand the relationships rather than just understanding someone's inner system. It brings to my mind, when as a teenager, when my mom would say something, I will have more of a, do this or don't do this. There's more of an urge to do it, like a rebellious teenager. So how the relationships impact our behavior? Yes. And our firefighters, I guess. I don't know, guys, if you've got any thoughts around that, but this is I think this is interesting. Yeah, Marlene?
Yes, thank you. That's so crucial, the environment. I was wondering why I was having a hard time changing behavior. And then somebody said to me, but your environment hasn't changed, and that's important. It's very hard to heal and to address these critics and firefighters and exiles when you're still living in an environment that triggers all of these parts, you know, where the other person may not be working on their issues, may not even be aware of them, or gets very defensive when they get pointed out. So, you know, when a person's working on their own internal turmoil and parts, and still be in an unhealthy environment, I think it's harder for the healing process to progress.
Yes.
And I'm
Oh,
out.
wow. Yes, thank you, Marlene, so much. And also, you know, if you like, you know, all your friends and peers support, or what, you know, if they're all like, they're all like, for example, doing drugs, it's very difficult to come out of this. The environment matters. But here's also something really, really interesting, okay? And she says here, she brings an example. She says, what we often find is that a client's firefighters are polarized with the manager parts of a partner, a parent, or some authority figure, which bolsters their determination and hinders the client's access to manager parts. So what does that mean? That means, say, like the manager or the parent or authority figure, yeah? They tell you, stop smoking. And the firefighter, the smokes, the part that smokes, instead of saying, yeah, I'll go along with what you say, no, bolsters its activity and becomes even more determined to do the addiction. Yes, yeah, I am complete. Anne?
I had a question about, because we've discussed, and also I know there's research showing how with just a single hypnosis treatment, and you've mentioned this in your experience, that someone can get over, say, smoking. And I'm wondering, is it because those clients have a relationship to their smoking that's no longer so outsourced to the other external environment, and then they are quite on the surface with real, you know, being in a relationship to, oh, there's the part that hates it, the part that still likes it, and that's why they're able to switch quite quickly with a single hypnosis session versus
with the external environment. No, so and if somebody wants to use hypnosis to stop smoking, then I would the advice is that they change their external environment, like they ask their partner to smoke outside the house, for example. So that, or I would ask them not to go to the pub for the next few weeks, like next couple of weeks or month or whatever, until it becomes a habit. Yeah. So yeah. So we still, you know, not in a hypnotic way, but kind of like maybe in hypnosis. And now we got here another hypnotist in the group. But you know, so we do give some kind of guidance about. So they do have a part that wants to stop smoking. They can see all the harm, and we persuade the smoking part to, you know, to support another healthy firefighter.
So it sounds like those clients are quite aware of the different parts in play. They just need a little more help externally and internally through hypnosis to get it.
Yeah, externally also, you know, we advise them not to avoid the environments that trigger. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but you know, I prefer IFS because you know, there are the parts that are engaged in this type of environment. You can speak to the part, you know, when you go and hang out, you go to the pub, you know, the part that goes, the social part that goes to the pub, is there another way for this part to avoid the smoking areas? Yeah, that it's much, so they have a better relationship with those parts that engage socially in this way. It makes sense? Rather than giving them a, do this instead of do this. This is my advice.
Yeah.
And I talk to their inner system.
Yes, absolutely. Like deeper healing than just like getting over their bad habit.
Yeah, or avoid the environment. Here's my
Yes.
advice: avoid the environment.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, that's helpful.
I mean, in hypnosis, it's a little bit more involved. You kind of engage your imagination as well, and I love that. And I'm not entirely sure how that. I think IFS would benefit from that.
Yes, yes. I think so, right? All those different
Yeah.
ways of accessing parts, and parts
I
can be
think both together,
yes. Yes,
the best of both.
exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Guys, can you see here the title, Befriending Managers? I'm moving on to another topic. I hope that's okay. I'm not seeing any hands up. Okay. I really like this here. If managers calm down, firefighters are much more likely to cooperate. So, does that make sense to you at all? So if the manager, like a critic, calms down, if your inner critic, oh, you're such an idiot, you've done this again. If that comes down, then the firefighter that does the addiction or the the risky thing, the risky activities, high risk, like I'm not sure, like sexual addiction, for example. The firefighters are more likely to cooperate. So yeah, Marlene.
That does make sense to me because the minute I'm told not to, or there's pushback, I'm going to push back harder. It's almost instinctual. And if there is a separation, then and there's cooperation, yeah, there's no need to rebel.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is it's kind of that polyvagal thing. It gets the sympathetic nervous system going. So I would go into fight right away and push back, rather than involve the self or the neocortex, where I'm coming from a more mature place. I'm coming from that childish place that says, oh no, you're not telling me what to do.
Even though it is your own part, yeah?
Yes, yes.
So like, yeah, you're not my authority. Yeah. Thank you,
It's
Marlene.
weird how your own part can feel externalized.
Yes, wow, yes. Or bullied by another part.
Yes, thank you, I'm done.
Paul?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of somebody I work with who's got a very, very, very strong. And funnily enough, when I did the Cece Sykes course, I went forward to do a demo, and I used this same example of this person who got such a strong manager critical part, and it's very difficult. That part is so strong in them, and he shuts down any discussion of anything other than his voice to be heard and to be critical of himself with his behaviors. But that's what, having read this, because it comes out more so, as I say, in reading the book than perhaps it did on that course. She talked about polarities, but, to engage the firefighter in terms of a discussion, or the addictive personality is, I don't know, that's something which I'm going to explore with him, because I'm still seeing him at some point, and see where that goes. Yeah, and she mentions it later on in the book about the person who turns up. She invites them, and they did turn up drunk.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my
Um,
God, yes.
But you know, I mean, but that is interesting, and for me, that is where do I, because I often consider, you know, the world of addiction is like, you know, you do. I often describe it as you go into another planet. It's not the same planet as world normal, so to speak. And but to engage somebody when they're on that other planet is very difficult. So, but that is something which, you know, is something I'm going to be thinking about, having read this. I'm going to be rereading this part here of the treatment because it had so much in it for me in terms of challenging through allowing the firefighter to have a voice and what does that uncover. So yeah, it's good, very good. This part of the book I really is very challenging for me.
It is wow. I
Very
think
good
it's
in a way, in a good way.
excellent.
Yeah.
I think, you know, this chapter, section 4, treatment,
Yeah.
is wow, excellent.
It is.
One I need to revisit.
I've finished.
But you know, as you said, Paul, the name of the vignette, it's Ida. The person's name was, I think it was Ida. She was drunk. She or he? He was a man. I'm sure it was a man. Or am I getting it wrong?
I think it was a woman. I think it was a woman. You know, I've been to 12-step meetings where people are asked to leave if they're drunk. There is a point, there is a case in that if somebody's rambling or whatever, but at the same time, there is this idea. I mean, it depends who's running the meeting, I find.
Well,
So, because they have different people running meetings, but some people allow people to just have the 3-minute share and you just ramble on or whatever. So, but this is saying, you know, welcome that part, which I agree with. That is very much. And I read years back, I read a book on, I have a book which is all about person-centered and working at relational depth. And that was an excellent chapter. I had an excellent chapter on working with somebody who's drunk. And it was the same thing as this, actually. So, but it wasn't parts. It was just having a person before you who is drunk and exploring what that was about and such like. So yeah, I need to reread that. It reminds me. I need to reread because it was an excellent chapter. So yeah, thanks. I'm finished.
Thank you, Paul. Anne?
I noticed that's in this bottom sentence where it says, however, they get real in a balanced system, however, they get real satisfaction from fulfilling expectations at work and in relationships, talking about healthy managers. And it reminds me of the really emphasizing like what are healthy firefighters doing? And for these managers, maybe they also do healthy behaviors in addition to fighting the addictive firefighters, and to have the really like absorb how good it feels when they do their job and it works well is such a positive aspect of IFS that seems to run through this book, because as in the noticing the positive, not just the positive, of course IFS is positive, but the aspect of IFS where you're noticing the positive, because we get a lot of like you give voice and you hear the negative and the unwanted, and it looks like here as important is being able to develop a awareness of the positivities in your system. And here it's helping the managers relish, you know, doing a good job, and maybe they'll feel much more empowered and willing to be flexible and find other ways.
Yes, once they unburden they unburden that kind of pain, and
yes,
they can be more present and spacious and enjoy life. Yeah. Okay. I also like this here, what she said. I think there's so many gold nuggets in this chapter. She says therapists believe direct access is a good option for engaging overly responsible, frantic, shaming, and blaming managers. We simply ask them how they're trying to help. Here, finding the positive intention through direct access. That's so interesting. You know, especially with, you know, somebody who's very, very angry. They would benefit in therapy if you do direct access. so they can express their anger, their fury, and they can express how they're trying to help with this kind of anger. Well, any kind of part that is overly responsible, frantic, shaming, and blaming. I think there's something to it. And I need to be paying to this a little bit more attention. I even noticed it in my own system when I have a more extreme manager. I enjoy more of the direct access. And it does, of course, depend on the person, I guess. I don't know. And I'm complete about this. There is another question I have here, guys. About, and she didn't really go deep into this. But the value of metaphors. Because like in hypnotherapy, we use metaphors. And here what Cece Sykes advises. She says, after engaging with a manager team, we review and highlight the addiction polarity with metaphors. For example, we may describe how managers are trying to take charge in a classroom of unruly kids, or keep a boat afloat in stormy waters. We underscore the impossible nature of their balancing act with firefighters, with each side escalating and no one seeing the exit ramp. We commiserate with managerial exhaustion. We promise that exiles who are behind the scenes can be helped. But yeah, even though she only quickly mentioned metaphors, I think this is extremely valuable, and I wish there was more material devoted, written around this. You know, for me, using a metaphor helps, it gives you an extra insight, this additional insight, this additional understanding, and it can really help so much with clearing the chaos, the inner chaos. Yes, Anne?
Yeah, I loved you pointing that out. And metaphors are like the stories, right? They contain this context and this larger picture, and the systems aspect of internal family systems. It really highlights how the relational interplay between all these different characters, and just immediately in one metaphor, you feel it all at once. You know, it's so strong. So yeah, I love that. And it'd be great to have more metaphors.
Yes. I often will ask the client, what is that like if we were to use a metaphor? So I had somebody who had an addiction, and they said, not this exact metaphor, or I'm changing it, but something like that. Well, I said something different. I said, is it like that? I gave my own metaphor. And then this person said, no, it's like, imagine an American football player scoring their own goal, you know? And then we spent the entire kind of session talking to this American football player who was trying to score own goal. I'm not into those kind of I don't really understand American football. Yes, scoring own goal. Yes,
I love yes, it's so important to have people encourage them to explore their own metaphors, right? Because it's the ones that are very resonant to the things that they're into, so that they're very connected to whatever, in this case, the American football system. But because they have such a deep relationship to those patterns and those stories and those concepts, when you encourage people to come up with their own metaphors, it's so
yes, it was so incredible.
Yeah.
Exactly. And my metaphor didn't ring true at all. He came up with his own metaphor. And in a way, then he saw self as a coach, helping, and connecting with the football player.
Yeah, for him that'd be perfect. Not for me, but yeah. Yes. There is a type of therapy called metaphor therapy. I don't know if anyone's
There
familiar.
is, and I think in a way, parts, and even though they feel real to us, I think there is still a metaphorical element to it.
Yes, they contain that symbolism and conceptual stories. Yeah.
Often people see their parts as any kind of characters, and people do sessions and connect with those characters from TVs, ghosts and cartoons and God knows what. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, last week. Last week, we discussed maybe doing the book Jailbreak next.
Mhm.
And to me, Jailbreak is just, the title of the book is a metaphor.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to point out that I think that relates, because I just got the book yesterday from Amazon, and but I haven't started reading it yet. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to point out that the title of the book and one of the central things that'll be in the book, I think, is the metaphor.
Yeah.
The Making and Breaking of Our Invisible Prisons is the subtitle of the book. And Richard Schwartz has a forward in the book that's really good. And it's IFS based and stuff. So I just wanted to point that out. And then I think in that one group that meets on Thursdays, which is doing Molly LaCroix.
Mhm. Yes.
That and a Christian IFS approach in that one book. I went to one meeting of that so far, and that is just completely based on metaphors when you're using the stories in the Bible to try to get control of your addictions, or get more access to self and stuff. So yeah, I'm a big believer in metaphors too.
Yes. And there's only 2 sentences devoted to metaphors in the entire book, and yet I really think it's so significant. So thank you, Mark, for sharing. Marlene?
Yes, there's a metaphor in here that I hadn't heard in a long time, and it's called breaking bread. And it's talking about the exhaustion, which I think is physical as well as mental, emotional, of the battle of the firefighters and the managers. And the managers battle really hard. It says they wrestle the firefighters, and we have to find a different way. And to invite them both to sit with the self and to break bread, that really hit me hard. Because in my family and my other relationships, we never broke bread together. And it was always very dysfunctional. And that phrase has such an honor and acceptance in it. We sit at the table with each other with our polarizations, and we accept each other. We don't fight, diminish, belittle, berate. I think in normal relationships, that's almost an ideal that is difficult to reach. Like, you can't be in the self all the time. You can't be breaking bread all the time. Thank you. I'm out.
That's brilliant, Marlene. Thank you. Yes. There's some words that really resonate with us, or some kind of metaphors, or whatever they're called, allegories. Yes. They make sense in a deep, visceral way, rather than just talking language, like in the normal, everyday way. So we'll move on to another part of the book. And I just wanted to point out here, Gina, the vignette with Gina. She arrived at therapy feeling miserable after a week of dropping the ball, being on edge, arguing with her daughter, and using a lot of cannabis. And in IFS parlance, again language, she had a parts attack. So I just wanted to point at this new kind of like whatever definition, I guess, when all parts show up together, everything is going kind of wrong. Yeah, parts attack. Yeah. And I think I'll move forward through the book and see if anything catches your attention, let me know. Oh yeah, here it is, Paul, the Ida. The therapist invited her to show up to therapy when she's drunk. Let's. I'm gonna maybe read a little bit of the summary, some of the summary here. This is about this vignette with Ida. Sykes says, this session informed Ida about the benign intentions of her drinking part and opened her heart to its feelings. It also introduced her to a key exile. While it is unconventional to invite a client to come to or stay in a session while engaging in their compulsive behavior, it can serve to reassure parts quickly and powerfully that we mean what we say. All parts are welcome. We won't judge. Wow, how powerful is that? Yes, Paul?
Yeah, no. Sorry, there's a cat outside yelling. Yeah, because again, later on, there's the guy who in the session she was engaging him and he was getting irate about, he's the one who she said to go into therapy or to go into rehab, and he left and he ended up getting shoplifting and whatever. You know, there's a person who I work with who I know through in their own therapy session has walked out of therapy because they're so sensitive to being judged. But so the question is how to engage, for me, the question is how to engage somebody who is in that place of, you know, that metaphor that I use is two planets. Who's on the other planet? How do I, on this planet, engage someone else who's on another planet is a metaphor where the two work in completely different, and I'm, you know, completely different. It's very different. It's a different planet. So as I say, that's the challenge for me to be able to engage that person. And yeah, so it's not easy, but yeah, seeing how that can play out. Finish. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Anne?
Is the idea then that the therapist is doing direct access or plans to? Because I don't know how much you can expect the client's self-energy to show up if you're asking them to come as firefighter.
When somebody turns up to the session drunk.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
stoned or on drugs or.
He's very brave.
Exactly. That's my question, is how, where is self when you're dealing with somebody who's in their addiction? There's not a lot of self present in that moment of the different planet. That was my question at the beginning of this tonight. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's something I need to think about.
Yeah. Grace?
Yeah, so I've been on both sides of this. And what's important is that whoever's on the other side of the person who's in the, whether they're imbibing in certain behavior, is to be embodied with self-energy. The other planet is self-energy. And what it does is it builds trust between that part, that firefighter and the practitioner or the therapist, whoever's on the other side of that part. It really, as she says, it proves that all parts are welcome. But the other person who's on the other side of the say, let's just say, you know, someone's drunk. Having self-energy is key, and yes, direct access is the way to go. Direct access with firefighters, whether sometimes even if they're not, you know, using the substance, and then also critics that are very harsh, direct access, and just someone that isn't able to access their own self-energy. There's lots of times where direct access is necessary.
Yes. Yeah, I do have a question from what you just said. Or question or wherever. I'm sure what I've heard is trauma happens in relationships. And trauma can be healed in relationships. So you need this kind of attachment to your therapist, where she's like, the therapist has got a lot of self, and that part can heal in relationship. Is that?
Yes. Yeah, I'm reminding myself.
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
No, sorry, I was just going to say I'm reminding myself, because I said that earlier, I need to be in myself with someone else who's on the other side, and keep it, if they're not in their self, I maintain my connection to myself, and then I can be there for them. That's it. Yeah. And yeah, and like you said as well, Vana, that the attachment, the relationship, the therapy or whatever else relationship is a healing thing in itself. So it's maintaining that relationship as well. It's it heals the attachment wounds.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I definitely having someone on the other side of a part who can be with self creates a healthy attachment, right? Like, and that attachment can also be, and the hope is that you can get that with your own self energy, have that healthy attachment within. So it can be both, but a lot of times it does start with the facilitator or therapist who's on the other side who can embody that. And you know what? There are going to be times when you can't embody that, right? You might get triggered or activated as a facilitator, but there's the opportunity to pause and do a U-turn and check inside and see what parts are coming up. And even, and we discussed this last week, speaking for the, oh, you know what, give me a moment, I have a part that's coming up. You could say that to the person across from you. And, you know, this isn't about being perfect. It's just about being self-aware and knowing the difference between when you're being led by self and when you're being led by a part.
Okay, wow, brilliant. Yes. Thank you. And you know, I do have a question about AI. A lot of people now, even some of my clients, they use the robots. Grace, you probably know about those. I don't know if you may have an opinion around that. I've not really used them myself. I want to though. Yeah. How is that gonna work though? I think they work to some extent, but they won't give you that healthy attachment that you get with a therapist.
It's more like self-therapy. Like you're not going to get attunement. You're not going to get co-regulation. It's just a little tool that you could use to do some work on your own.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I've used it a few times. It does have a place. I've done IFS on with AI, and it can bring issues up because they ask the right questions to do the thing. The AI knows. I think it's going to develop. I mean, but the issue of self, because there is no person behind it. I mean, I was watching yesterday an AI that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. I mean, the way it's going, he's going to be, but there still isn't a person. There isn't, and I often think this, there isn't the spirit present. The spirit, the human spirit, the human soul, the self of a human. So it can use the techniques very well, which then can do some of the work that I can then take to therapy. That's what I've used it as in the past during the week. So yeah.
Guys, thank you, Paul. Can you share with us what kind of AI tools you wanna, if you wanna type it in the comments and I will read them, or you wanna tell me here what kind of AI tools, you know, what's the name of the robot? Thing. Yeah, Anne?
You see, there are IFS AI systems, which I can put some in the chat, but also you can just tell ChatGPT or whatever large language model, like, please act like a IFS therapist, and it will have the context of whatever it can read. So you can ask, just ask any large language model. I think because it's, you know, based on information and perspectives, it can offer a perspective which helps you access, like through self-therapy, but helps you access self-energy through a contextually, you know, detailed, contextually nuanced response, right? Because if you tell it's the detail, then it's able to assemble patterns that it's seen relating to that context to help prompt other perspectives. Something I have asked for is for empathy using metaphors. So it's because it's very astonishingly good at metaphors, unlike previous AI systems. You can say, I'm interested in these things. These are my you know, favorite topics or whatever, and I'm having this problem. Can you give me a metaphor to understand the problem? And it'll give you a very personally relevant metaphor. And you can, if you don't like it, you can say, oh no, but this part doesn't sound right. And then it'll try again. So I think it really enriches, you can use it if you're using it in that way to enrich your own understanding, because it can offer you that contextual storytelling.
Yeah, wow, brilliant. It's mad what it can do. Yeah, thank you. Grace?
I was just going to say, I had a scary thought, like pretty soon babies and children are going to be parented by AI, and it's already happened, right? It's they got the tablets and the phones and all that, right? Like there is no co-regulation, and there's in the US here, it's been the Surgeon General has announced that it's a mental health threat. And originally, I actually thought of Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams. I don't know if you saw that movie. He is an actual robot AI who does raise a child, but he actually, the beauty of the story is he actually was able to get spirit, soul, emotion somehow. It's a great movie if nobody's seen it.
Yeah. Bicentennial, what did you call Bicentennial Man?
Bicentennial Man.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh wow. Okay, and I've got here IFS Buddy or Open AI IFS. Okay.
There's also, am I still on? I don't know if I'm muted. No, I didn't. There's also, you could talk to Richard Schwartz. You could chat with him.
Yeah.
And that's under Character AI.
Character AI. Okay.
There's I subscribe to Psychotherapy Networker, and this one, an edition from time back, AI Intelligent Therapy, an article by Matthias Barker, who works with Frank Anderson a lot. So Matthias Barker is the go-to guy who's very much the therapist who's in, I didn't do that course on using social media, but he's very much using all the current technologies where possible with therapy. I watch quite a few of his stuff. He's a young sort of up and coming person. He started doing PESI courses, but he works with Frank Anderson as well. But yeah, I mean, there's a place for it. As I say, I think it's a tool, and but nothing can replace the person in the end. But then, yes, the idea of what you're saying there, Grace, you're about children, and you know, but that is the world of children today. It is technology. That is it by and large, and you know what can be done to bring the human compassionate spirit into all that. That's the question. Thanks.
AI can write with a lot of emotion, so it's almost there, I think. You can ask AI, like, Anne talked about empathy. Give me some metaphors with empathy or something. So Yeah, there's another AI tool here, www.refract.space. Okay. And there is a report about the harmful effects of social media on the youth mental health. Before we close, I want to share something else and something a little bit more positive. Again, and I'm going to read this little part. She says, let manager parts know that external containment measures will give them a break. Maybe admitting themselves into I don't know, whatever they call safe houses. I don't know, admitting themselves somewhere for detoxing. But you know, so it says, if you want to be admitted somewhere to detox, let your manager parts know that this external containment measures will give them a break. Yeah. But she says, when we take this route, protective firefighter parts can run aggressively and contemptuously, accusing us of abandonment or betrayal. In this case, we would probably need to help our own managers stay calm so we can guide the client to hear from the parts inside who do want to survive, who yearn for health, safety, and freedom from compulsion. So here she invites the other side that wants the health, wants the recovery, wants the safety and the freedom from compulsion. She invites those kind of allies to the system to be seen. So I like this kind of positive angle, rather than just talking to firefighters and managers. What about inviting the parts that really want survival, health? Yeah, so that's I'm not entirely sure if you've got any thoughts around that. It's okay if you don't, and I'm, you know, I guess when you try to get to know the system, you'd probably know those parts as well, the parts that want health and safety and freedom, because it does seem to be, we were like getting a lot of focus, we put a lot of focus on the polarity between managers and like critical harsh, the critical harsh managers and the firefighters. So I'd like also to think that we can also invite into this meeting the managers that want health and safety and freedom from compulsion. And they're not the critical ones, they're not the extreme ones, yeah? But they give you, again, another perspective. So I'm complete with this. And I'll give it a few more seconds if no one, if we all complete. Yeah.
Can you go to the next page, the example?
Yeah. Lucas, the example.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Let's see. Let's see, yeah. Shall I read the little summary here?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so Lucas continued to use heavily for a few more weeks, occasionally calling or texting the therapist, but not showing up for an appointment. When she got him on the phone for a few minutes. She continued to listen to his parts and reflected that some of them needed a different life, while some wanted to keep using. She also asserted that his using parts were trying to help him and wondered if they didn't need a break too. A month later, Lucas was arrested for shoplifting. He was offered the option of substance use treatment and went to a local center. After that, he entered a halfway house, looked for work, and returned to his IFS therapist. So, is that okay for you, Grace?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that there is something like 12 step. It's called the gift of desperation. When you hit that point where, you know, if it's an addictive thing, it's going to lead you to some form of destruction in one area of your life if it's not addressed. So
Yeah.
that's what happened there. But it can bring people back to whatever recovery is for them, an IFS, you know, so.
Yes, and you know, when somebody goes into the treatment center, is admitted to the treatment center, that gives a relief to the critical managers because they're no longer using. That is amazing for some of the parts. It's like, yes, but then that can trigger the firefighters. They're like, no, we really want to use, what are you doing? Why, we really want the relief from the drugs or the shoplifting or whatever. Why are you doing this to me? You know, this is unfair. And then so parts need to communicate with other parts and the self. And we are complete for today. I'll see you next week to complete the section 4 treatment. It's going to be our last session next week on section 4.
Thank you very, very much. My parts are very happy right now.
Okay. Thank you.